Hi everyone, thank you for joining me during this session. I'm really happy to be here again with Data Toboggan team. So today I will be talking about one of the most interesting functionalities that are present in connection with SQL Server 2022. And this functionality is called Azure Synapse Link SQL Server 2022. We'll start with a bit of history. As you may be aware, and as you know, each version of SQL Server gave us something new in terms of, for example, optimization or new features that really changed the way we work. We are working today with this solution. So it is with the SQL Server 2022, because this version of SQL Server is really focused on enabling all the capabilities connected with the cloud. And one of such capabilities is of course Azure Synapse Links. I will not go through all of the new features, but just to point out where the Azure Synapse Link and this functionality is in the whole landscape of new options in SQL Server 2022. We will operate on part of features called seamless analytics over on-prem operational data, and I will show you how to join your on-prem solution if you're hosting your database in SQL Server 2022, how to join it with the Azure Synapse Analytics, and how to perform really well performing analytics and on this at-scale solution, so to say. So if you are looking on the SQL Server 2022 and its functionalities, we'll have a few blocks of new features. And as I said, I will not point out every feature, but we'll focus on the block called Cloud Connected. And within this Cloud Connected features, we'll find Synapse Link to the SQL Server 2022. But you should be also aware that this is not the only one link connection introduced in SQL Server 2022. Because the second one, the second option we have, we can also link our SQL Server 2022 database with, for example, managed instance. So it's a bit different than the Synapse Link, but it also addresses some very important scenarios here. So what about those cloud connected features? As I mentioned, I will show you the Azure Synapse Analytics link connection, and it relies on a feature called and changes in this feature called data changes. Actually, this version of SQL Server 2022, together with Synapse Link, introduces quite a, so to say, new mechanism here, because this mechanism of replicating data will rely on something called change data feed. So we will not rely on well-known feature like change data capture instead of change data feed, and I will try to point out the differences here. Of course, we will be working with our well-known Azure Synapse Analytics workspace. I will tell you something about the prerequisites that you should meet before starting creating the connection with your on-prem SQL Server. But yeah, we'll point it out later. What's new here? What's the idea behind the ability to create the link connection between on-premises SQL Server and Azure Synapse Analytics? Well, the idea is quite simple. We want to bring the whole analytical solution, the whole powerful analytical solution, which is of course Azure Synapse Analytics, to our on-prem sources without doing the whole expensive ETL, ELT transformation. So we want to minimize the time from bringing the data to creating the analytics over this data, and this is why this connection was invented. And I will show you how to create it, and you will be able to assess whether there is a business case or business scenario when you can use this this solution. So as I mentioned, we have the on-premises SQL Server 2022 version. Sorry, can you mute? Thank you. And then on the side of Azure Synapse Analytics, we'll use all the runtimes we know. So we can create, for example, notebooks. We can use the Spark runtimes. We can analyze the data the way we know from the Synapse Analytics itself. So a few prerequisites you should know before we jump into the demo. Of course, we should have Synapse workspace created, and within this Synapse workspace, we'll work with a dedicated SQL pool, because this connection, this link connection, need to have a database on the side of the on the side of Azure Synapse Analytics. So on the on-prem side, we have the SQL Server 2022, and on the Azure Synapse Analytics side, we have this dedicated SQL pool. Then there is some concept like landing zone, and this landing zone will be introduced as the dedicated data lake stored second generation, of course, and I will tell something about it later. Of course, to have the connection between on-prem and cloud, we need to have self-hosted integration runtime configured out. Of course, if we are thinking about the production, then we should have at least 2 self-hosted integration runtimes and so on and so on. But for the purpose of this demo, I will have just one machine created and one service created. Then, of course, we should have SQL Server 2022 database with some of the prerequisites on the schema, on the table, and the things in the database, and I will tell you something about it a bit later. And then we'll be able to use this mechanism, which bases on the change data feed. It's quite similar to using the link connection between the SQL database and the Azure SQL database and Azure Synapse Analytics, but there are some differences here. You probably met this formula of Synapse Link connection first time when Microsoft introduced the connection between the Azure Synapse Analytics and Cosmos DB. This is not the same concept. This is a different concept, and I will try to point out the differences between all of them. Okay, so how it works? Imagine we have an on-prem solution with SQL Server 2022 of existing database, which we want to connect to our Synapse Analytics, Azure Synapse Analytics. Then we have our Synapse workspace with a SQL dedicated pool created, and this dedicated pool should be big enough to be able to consume this to be able to consume this data from our on-prem SQL Server. And there are some things you should be aware when creating the dedicated SQL pools. I believe some of them will be pointed out by during the other session, because I saw that in the agenda that there is a session on the differences between the serverless and dedicated SQL pool. So I will not go into the details, but there are a few things you should be aware of, like the distribution and the number of nodes and so on. Okay, the next step we have here is the creation of the linked service for our SQL, our on-prem SQL server. So this is the usual thing. So we are using our self-hosted integration runtime. We are creating this linked service just like usual in the Synapse workspace. We use the credentials to our SQL server. doesn't matter, Windows credential or Active Directory credential or SQL credential authentication. We use it to create this control channel for our ingestion service. Ingestion service will be something very important here to keep this connection, this link between on-prem and Synapse Workspace alive. So the first one is the link service for our our on-prem SQL Server. The second one is the link service for our landing zone, and our landing zone is and should be dedicated ADLS Gen 2 storage, and it is used for all the artifacts created during the link connection, and it is used to store all the artifacts that are created during the change data feed, the change data feed replication between on-prem and Synapse Workspace. One thing I should mention here with this landing zone, this should be separated and secured, and we, as the user of our solution, should not do anything with this data in the landing zone. It is used for the automatical purpose of creating and establishing the connection, the link connection between those two solutions. Okay, so the first, when we create the connection, the link between our on-prem SQL Server and our Synapse Workspace, the first thing which is done here is generating the initial snapshot of our tables. So we choose the tables that we want to replicate to our Synapse Workspace, and then our SQL Server creates this so-called table snapshots and creates Parquet files with the data and the schema files, and the schema files are created as the JSON files. And all of this is transferred to our landing zone by using this ingestion service. And ingestion service is another concept introduced here, and I will show you what it is when I will show you how to create this link connection between those services. Then, when the connection is established and the link is active, any changes that we have in our on-prem tables that are selected to be replicated to our Synapse Workspace create a kind of log changes, and those log changes are sent to the change feed queue, and this change feed queue is, so to say, transformed to a CSV files with a manifest file. And manifest file is also a JSON file. And this is sent to our landing zone. And this is done automatically. We should not do anything with that because after some time, there is on this landing zone, there is also a job who clean up this landing zone. So when we have a lot of changes, so a lot of CSV files and a lot of manifests, then these CSV files are finally merged to the Parquet, and it is done automatically. We should not, as I said, we should not use it. We should not join and connect directly to this landing zone. I know we can think about many interesting scenarios, like, well, joining directly to this landing zone and doing some, for example, Spark transformations or even machine learning transformations, but it is not recommended. It is not recommended here to disable, to destroy this link connection between Synapse and SQL Server. Finally, we can join to our dedicated SQL pool, which have our on-prem data replicated, for example, with Power BI. Of course, we can query directly with T-SQL like usual dedicated SQL pool. But if we connect Power BI and imagine if we have a Power BI report created with a direct query connected to the SQL dedicated pool on our Synapse workspace. And then our data in a table, which is joined by the link connection with our Synapse workspace, and our data changes, then all those changes will be replicated by the ingestion service through the landing zone directly to our dedicated SQL pool. And then if we refresh our report, well, we can have those data present in our report in the matter of seconds or minutes, and depends on the actual data volume. So the actual business scenario is quite interesting here. Okay, so now let's switch to the demo, which I created to show you how to create this connection. Let me show you. We'll start with my virtual machine with SQL Server 2022, just to show you that this is the version. So I have here my SQL Server 2022 database server and database. I will use well-known wide world importers database. So the first thing I should do is to restore this database from the backup, and that's what I'm doing here. Sorry. I should change names of the files. Just a minute. It's the law of live demo. Okay, and after a minute or two, we should have new restored database. Okay, and there is, you should see, there is our wide world importers DT, which I restored just before. We have some tables. Some of them are pointed out as the system version. So we have, for example, such mechanism like change data capture and so on, and many other things that are actually not supported during this link connection. And I will try to point out something about it. I will add new tables here just for the demo purposes. So to say, we'll add this vehicles and vehicle stock items. And then we'll try to populate some data to these newly created tables. So just some inserts. And then what should we do on the SQL Server 2022 site to prepare our database to be able to connect it through the link with Synapse? Well, we should exclude all unsupported features and data types. And some of the unsupported features are, for example, those change data capture mechanism, but also column store indexes, some data types like geographic data types and some more complex data types. All of them should be excluded. So I'm just simply dropping those columns that I will not be able to connect through my link connection. As you can see, in such a big database, there are some columns and there are some constraints that we should set off and prepare our database to be able to be connected. Right now, we should have a clear situation here. So let's, we see that there are no tables marked as the system version. So we are ready to do this connection. Of course, the other thing is that I should create in this database a master key. And then on the side of the on-prem, on the SQL Server 2022, that's it. We are ready to to create this link connection. As you can see, also our self-hosted integration runtime is working and is connected to the cloud service. So we are ready to go to the Synapse. Let me switch to Synapse. Okay, there it is. There is my demo workspace. I actually have some link connections working to show you, because I'm not sure if those 5 or 6 minutes we'll be able to establish the connection, because it needs some time to be created. However, we have also the dedicated data lake storage with our landing zone container. I named it landing zone, and this is dedicated to establish this connection. What we should do here is, well, we should have our dedicated SQL port working and ready to be joined with our SQL Server 2022. I created the smallest one with the TW100C size just for the demo purpose, and it is working. It is online, and I can work with this SQL pool. I'm connected to this to my database, to my pool. If I didn't do it before, I should create a master key, but I did it before, so I will not repeat it. But yeah, we should have a master key. We should also have created schemas to hold our tables from the tables which we choose to replicate from our SQL Server. So let's have a look how our database looks right now. We don't have such schemas with DT, so we will create these schemas, and then we can go to the integration, and we can try to create this link connection. So here we have those integrate pipelines, and then I'm clicking on the plus, and we have something like a link connection option. Okay, so when I'm working with the link connection, I should select my source type, and my source type is not Azure SQL Database, but SQL Server on-prem. And then I should select my linked service to my SQL Server 2022 on-prem. Let's assume that I don't have such connection created, so I will create a new link connection, new linked service. Let's call it SQL Server DT. And of course, we should select our self-hosted integration runtime. It's present here. Our server name is vmnd wdemo. And then our database is called Wide World Importers DT. So I'll just copy the name from here. Yeah, I'm using simple authentication type because it's not the purpose of this presentation. And my username is the same. Okay, let's try if it worked. Test connection. Connection failed. Why? Okay. It's not there. Cool. And again, it's a law of a live demo. What was the name of my user? Sorry, let me check. My linked services. Oh, it's called SQL admin. Okay. So again, integration, link connection, source type SQL Server, new. Self-hosted integration runtime. This is my server name. This is my database, SQL admin. And then, yeah. And now connection is successful. So we are creating this link service to our on-prem SQL Server. And after a few seconds, yeah, we should be able to see the tables from our on-prem SQL Server, and we can select some of them to be replicated through this link connection. And let me select those two created within the vehicles, warehouse vehicles and warehouse vehicle stock items. I can also preview the data within these tables. So as you can see, we have some data on the vehicles, show the schema, we have some stock items. So this is one of our, so to say, dimension tables and one of our fact tables. We can also call them like that. Then let's go to creating the target pool settings. And target pool is, of course, my Synapse dedicated SQL pool. So I'm just simply choosing the SQL pool which is working in this Synapse. Then I should name this link connection. Let's call it link connection DT. And here is the new concept, the new thing I pointed out earlier. This is this integration service. You should choose how many cores. So in other words, you should choose the configuration of the integration service, which will be used to provide this link connection, which will be used to provide all those change data feeds activities. And well, the recommendations are, of course, let's try with something small, and then in case of bigger needs, scale it up. So we will use the smallest one, 2 + 2 driver cores integration service. It can operate within 2 modes, the continuous one and the scheduled. And the schedule is something like the triggers mechanism within the Synapse. So for the purpose of our connection, we will create the continuous mode. So any changes in any time, whenever this connection is active, this link connection is active, will be propagated from our on-prem SQL Server to our dedicated SQL pool within the Synapse workspace. The next thing I should create and I should configure is my landing zone link service. So let's do it. LST. Let's authenticate through the account key. This is my TLS SQL and WTMO. So this is my dedicated data lake storage for this landing zone. Let's create this linked service. Okay, and now I should point out my landing zone folder path. So in other words, my container for my landing zone. So I have this container created before. But to authenticate to this container, I should have existing SaaS token. So this is the moment when I will switch to this landing zone container and generate shared access token. Okay, let's say it will work. It will expire tomorrow, and let's give him without ownership and permissions. Okay, so I'm just simply copying my SaaS token, putting it here. Okay. And now you see this view of configuration of our link connection. So we just selected two source tables that will be replicated to our dedicated SQL pool. We've selected the target tables. Then we should check whether the schema pointed out here exists. And it by default, it uses the same name. So we have here warehouse and then vehicles. And as you remember, I created this dedicated schema with a DT in the end. So I will just add it here. So it's going to be warehouse DT, warehouse DT. These are the properties of my link connection and the integration service and so on. So this is the place when I can change all those settings. Well, what now? Now I should consider any distribution and structure types on the side of the dedicated SQL pool. I will not go into the details on this, but as I mentioned before, you should be aware on how the dedicated SQL pool works. How is this MPP architecture created here, and you should know how to leverage all the power behind this MPP architecture when using this dedicated SQL pool. For the purpose of demo, I will just leave the distribution of the round robin and the clustered column store index. So we will not go into details here. Well, looks like we have everything ready to create this connection. So the one thing we should do is, well, publish our changes to be propagated to our workspace. And then we will try to start our connection. The link connection is in the starting position. So let's go back to our on-prem SQL Server to show, to see if anything changes here. Let's switch to my virtual machine. We have few very useful stored procedures to monitor this link connection. Let's switch to our newly created database whiteboard importer SDT. And to show the configuration, the actual configuration of our change data feed, we can use this sp help change feed stored procedure. And it looks that the change feed is not enabled on the database. So as you can see, I just clicked this start link connection in the Azure Synapse Analytics, and it needs some time to propagate the changes to create this change feed. And after that, we should be able to see how the connection looks like. For the purpose of the demo, I will show you the existing connection from my other database. It's the same database used for the demo, but with the existing connection. So let's go with the PBI. How the configuration looks like. We have these results in the grid. So right now we have the information on the tables that are selected to be replicated. Then we have the information on the destination location. So the destination location and destination credential are the destination of our landing zone. The workspace ID is, of course, the ID of our Synapse Analytics workspace, and then we have this information, the work group name, and then we can see from which schema, which table name, so which tables from which schema, and we have their IDs, then their object IDs, and whenever this snapshot was created, we have the snapshot start time, end time, and so on. And we know how many rows were replicated during this snapshot. The next thing we can monitor here, we can review any change fit errors. If anything happens, then we can use this DM change fit errors to have the information on what's wrong. As you can see, the connection is working, and it's it doesn't generate any errors here. If we have any current activity during our link connection, then we can use this DM change feed log scan sessions to have the overview of the sessions that we're working here. As you can see, I just started this session today. So we have overview of all the changes that were propagated during the existing link connection, and we can see here some useful informations, for example, like currently processed commit time and log record count. Log record count, it says how many records were propagated through this link connection from my database, from my on-prem database to my dedicated SQL pool. Okay, let's see if this connection is ready or not. Okay, I think it's ready. So we have those definitions of our configuration, as you can see, these are selected tables from the warehouse schema. So it seems that it is working, and we should have even some rows propagated. So let's check. Let's switch to my Synapse. So we have this connection running. Let's go to this develop, click demo, select quantity, vehicles stock items, count cargo. Let's see. Yeah. So we have data in our dedicated SQL pool. Yeah. So as you can see, I just simply created this T-SQL query to query my my dedicated SQL pool, and these are data propagated from my on-prem server. And let's try to put some new records here. I will not switch to my virtual machine. I will do it in the background. So I'm just simply inserting some new values here. I just put it new stock items, and maybe let's create a new SQL script. Join to my dedicated SQL pool and same query again. See, we have 7 in the cargo for my Waco vehicle city, and before we had 1. So as soon as I simply put those records in my on-prem SQL Server, they are really propagated to this dedicated SQL pool here. And what's the power behind that? Well, we can use it, for example, as I said, to create such very useful Power BI reports. connected directly to our dedicated SQL pools, for example, to visualize those on the map. And then after anything changes in our on-prem data, we can simply have it visualized in a matter of seconds or few minutes in our report. So it looks very promising, like very promising solution here. Okay, let's go back to my presentation. So what's the difference between the other concept behind the link connection already introduced in the Synapse? So I mean Cosmos DB versus this SQL Server Synapse Link. Well, the concept itself is the same, but it uses a kind of different techniques. So when we use the Cosmos DB, we can select, it's simply in the configuration that the Cosmos DB can create the analytical store for us, and then we can create this native HTTP connection between the Synapse and Cosmos DB itself. That it doesn't need to provide any other infrastructure requirements and prerequisites like self-hosted integration runtime, integration ingestion service, and so on, which we need to use to provide it from our SQL Server 2022 to the Synapse itself. Is it ready for huge scale analytics? Well, the answer is yes, but it depends. It depends that on such things that you should be aware of it. That we are what we are doing here. We are simply putting our OLTP optimized structures into dedicated SQL pool, which is created on the base of the MPP architecture, which is optimized for analytics. So there are some things we need to consider, and some of them are the distribution methods. So as I mentioned, I just used in the demo the default distribution of the round robin, but when creating this connection, and if you want to use it in the production scenarios, then you should really be very careful with choosing the proper distribution methods for each table which you want to use and to propagate during this link connection. So the other thing is that we should also be aware of that that our dedicated SQL pool has those concurrent query limits. But well, let's say that's not the case. That's not the case here. Few notes worth to mention about the Synapse Link. Of course, more information and this workshop resources you can find following this link. We should be aware that for the monitoring purposes, we have those views, those stored procedures, but also extended events for any purpose of debugging of this connection. There are some data types that are not supported here. For example, the more complex one like image, XML, timestamp, UDT, geometry, and geography. We can use it with the database that use the temporal memory optimized CDC, column store, or graph. Then if we want to spend less money on the ingestion, then we should switch the scheduled mode instead of the continuous one. Of course, the separate linked connections to separate the ingestion. The transactions that are sent to landing zone and the landing zone itself should not be used for any other purpose. And well, I think that's it. Thank you very much.